All right, Rabbi, say good morning. Let us begin. All right, so we are picking up Mesillas Yesharim this morning in Parikutes. First of all, welcome to our 101st shiur. Very exciting, Baruch Hashem, of our journey in Mesillas Yesharim. So we are picking up. Actually, it's a new section. So the Ramchal writes over here, Unedaber ata me'inyan aha'ava. Let's speak about the concept of love, or the role of love, the function of love in our relationship with Hashem. So remember again, just reorient ourselves a little bit. We're in Parikutes, chapter 19, focusing on Chassidus. Chassidus, on the most basic level, represents exceeding expectations, or the need, the want, the desire to exceed expectations. Whereas the tzaddik lives up to expectations, the chassid wants to exceed expectations. How does one exceed the Ribono Shel Olam's expectations? Well, if one looks at mitzvos as indicators of that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, so therefore performance of mitzvos means living up to expectations, but ultimately, again, being a chassid means now that I know what Hashem likes, I'm going to find additional ways in which to give my Father nachos and exceed those expectations. That's what it means, says Ramchal, to be a chassid. So now again, we learned one more piece. Ramchal said there are different ways in which we're able to be a chassid. We're focusing now in the area of what he calls ofen ha'asiyah, the manner in which we perform mitzvos. So now we're talking about the role of love and its function in the performance of mitzvos. So he says as follows: let's speak now a little bit in the concept of love. There are really three parts, or three aspects, three branches to love: hasimcha, hadveikus, v'hakina. So the truth is, we'll define these ideas just very superficially now. We're going to delve into each of them. Simcha we translate as joy. Dveikos we translate as clinging. Kina. Now kina is interesting. How do we normally translate kina? Jealousy. So we're going to see kina could also mean a sense of kanos, a sense of zealotry, a certain sense of eagerness. But like I said, we'll get into each of these. V'hinei, ina avas. Let's focus ultimately on a general level. What is ava? V'hina avahum. Shia adam choshek u'misave mamesh el kirvaso yisbarach. So we'll say, what does it mean to love Hashem? And by the way, what's really important about this is a little bit of just a general focus. Sometimes we'll say, if you think about it, we learn a daf Gemara every single day, right? We learn a lot of Gemara, a lot of halacha. And sometimes it's interesting that when I kind of look at my spiritual self, I realize, or I feel that there are gaping holes in terms of the fundamentals. For example, right, we have a mitzvah every day. We read in Kriyat Shema, V'yahavtas Hashem Elokecha, love Hashem. What does it mean to love Hashem? What does that mean? So the Ramchal writes here something amazing. See, he says, he discusses over here that what does it mean to be in love with Hashem? Now, let's say we're going to see the difference. To love Hashem may actually be an actional obligation. That's why Rashi, for example, says on the pasuk, "V'yahavtas Hashem lokecha," to love Hashem. Rashi says, "Asei dvarav me'ava." Rashi says, loving Hashem means the manner in which you perform mitzvos. Serve Hashem like you love Him. Rashi understands it as an actional component. The Ramchal here is describing, and it's actually quite beautiful, what does it mean to be in love with Hashem? What it means to be in love with Hashem, a person simply desires, a person wants, a person desires a closeness to Hashem. To be in love with God means I desire, I want a sense of closeness. I want to be connected. And I run after the holiness of Hashem. Rabbi say, just like we run after things that we strongly desire, so I desire, I want, I love a relationship with Hashem so much that it's something that I pursue. Something I pursue. Ad shia lo askaras shmo yisbarach v'daber b'tilosav va'isik b'divrei Torah v'elokuso yisbarach. So to the point that ultimately when I hear a mention of Hashem's name, or ultimately again a discussion about His greatness, or I'm engaged somehow in the words of Torah, shashua va'oreg mamish. I feel a sense of joy. I will say, you ever know, like sometimes a parent could relate to this, when you hear someone say something nice about your child, right? It like awakens something in you. Or someone, talks about your spouse, when you hear someone mention someone who you love, like it excites you. So the Ramchal says over something beautiful, that the goal is to get to a point. The goal is to get to a point where the mere mention of Hashem's name, right, or a discussion of the greatness of Hashem, or engagement in Torah creates a shashua va'onev mamish, creates a sense of joy and a sense of pleasure. Kimisha ohev es eshes ne'urav o beno yechido ava chazaka. To come to a love of Hashem like one loves his spouse. Now he describes it as eshes ne'urav. So it's interesting. What is eshes ne'urav? The wife of your youth. Now, what he's describing over here, I love the wife of my youth, I love the wife of my middle age, my old age. Right, what he's describing is there's a certain intensity in a relationship, when it's new. When it's new, that the love often morphs. And I will say, we know, by the way, this herein lies the great challenge of marriage, right? The goal is to keep my marriage as exciting, as passionate, and as beautiful, and as meaningful 20, 30 years in, 40, 50 years in, as it was at the day of the chuppah. Obviously, everything morphs and everything changes. But I will say, I just want to point out something amazing. It is dramatic how the Ramchal is describing that my relationship with Hashem should look like my marriage. Right? In other words, but my marriage, like at the height of its excitement, right? At the height of its passion. And the Ramchal is not the first person who does this. The Rambam already does this. Right? The Rambam discusses Avas Hashem and compares it to a human relationship. What's the comparison? The comparison is that when a person is first married, right, my thoughts are consumed by my wife, right? Everything. In other words, it's not just the pshat that I'm married and it's a function of a number of different things in my life. It becomes an all-consuming emotional, all-consuming feeling. That's what it means to be in love with Hashem. To be in love with Hashem means that ultimately, again, I feel all consumed by this relationship. It's such a beautiful idea. So again, I want to point out that Ramchal is describing an emotional state of love. He's not describing what the obligations of being in love are. He's describing what it feels like to be in love. Now I will say, the truth is, all you need to do to relate to this is to go back to a time in life. Hopefully, you don't have to go back to a time in life, right? But again, but right there. Sorry, that did not come out right. I was like, so what? Yeah, we're gonna edit that later, right? I was like, what it means is think about that feeling of being in love. Just think about that feeling of being in love, and what that feeling feels like, right there, and how that feeling can be all encompassing. And when you feel that, that's love. That's love. Imagine feeling that way about the Ribono Shel Olam. Imagine feeling that way about Hashem. Then I will say, now, again, once you frame it like that, I don't need explanations. I know what it is. Because I know what it is to love. And I will say, by the way, it's being in love. It's being in love with your wife. It's also, I'll say, you remember that feeling, that moment where I think it's especially like, a person has, Baruch Hashem, a child, and you hold that first child in your arms in that first moment. You remember that feeling of the entirety of my being is embedded in this little baby. Every ounce of love and every ounce of koach and every ounce, it's yours. It's you. There is nothing else in my world right now but that little baby. There's nothing there. You feel it, of course, with every child. But Lamaisa, there's something different when it's the first and you've never had this experience before. That's love. That's love. That all-encompassing feeling that everything I am, everything I have, every bit of energy is yours, that's love. So the Ramchal says, imagine experiencing that with the Ribono Shel Olam. He goes on, he says, Asher afilu hadibar bam bahem yelenachas v'tanug u'kedin akasov kimidei dabri bo zachar eskarenu od. So I will say, and that love manifests itself to the point that, again, even when there's just a mere mention of the person or the thing that I love, it generates such a sense of simcha, such a sense of joy. He says, Kimi dei dabri bo zacharas karenu od. Right, this is the Haben Yakir Ephraim. Every time I speak of him, I remember him more. Hine vadai. We'll say, let's go weiter. So now, just to point out, what Ramchal has done for us over here is describe for us what Ava is. What Ava is. A desire to be close to something, a desire to be one with something, a desire ultimately, again, to simply be embedded with something. And every single time I mention its name, or I'm involved in its service, whatever the it is, ultimately it engenders this incredible, elevated emotional level. That's love. That's love. V'hinei vadai, shemisha oev es haboro avas amitis. Obviously, any person who truly loves HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lo yaniach avodaso l'shum tam sheba'olam, im enos mamash. So, enos mamash. So we'll say, see now, here's what's interesting. How does love manifest itself? One of the ways in which love manifests itself is commitment. Right? When I love someone or I love something, I'm always going to be committed to serving that person or that thing. And the only thing that'll get in the way of me serving that person or that thing is some type of extenuating circumstance. That's what love is. That's what love is. I will say, by the way, if you think about it, that's why in relationships, right, when one party fails to come through, right, or one party doesn't produce, or one party doesn't live up to agreed upon expectations, right, why does it generate so much hurt? Why does it generate so much hurt? Because you don't love me. You don't love me. Because if you loved me, nothing would get in your way. If you loved me, you would live up to expectations. If you loved me, you'd be home on time, right? If you loved me, you would do what you said, because you told me you were going to do something. And then Ramchal says, by the way, that's a correct statement. Because when you love someone, nothing gets in the way of fulfilling your expectations and obligations towards that person, towards that entity. And I was like, you understand, by the way, how he's framing this in Avodas Hashem. So what does it mean to love Hashem? I live up to my expectations, or as a chassid, I exceed my expectations. And nothing gets in the way of my service of Hashem. Nothing gets in the way, except, of course, if there are those extenuating circumstances that no one could control. Otherwise, I live up to my expectations, or exceed those expectations. And I don't need to be enticed. I don't need to be incentivized. I don't need to be bribed. So I'll say it's incredible also, right? I don't need to be incentivized or bribed in any way, but rather, again, barring unforeseen circumstances, right? Barring that ones situation, I'm in, and I'm doing what I need to. I will say, it's so profound. He knows us. I will say, it also tells you, by the way, anything for which you need to be incentivized or bribed or enticed, what does that show? You're not in. Which again, is not a chiddush. It's not a chiddush. We know it, but it's absolutely profound. I will say, now you begin to also understand in Chazal why, again, Chazal are always speaking about don't do things for the purpose of schar. Because when you do things for the purpose of schar, again, what that just shows is, I'm not in love. And that's already a downgraded relationship with Hashem. It's so profound. He goes on, he says, Hine zos, hi amida hanechmedes asher ilazo chasid marishonim kidoshei elyon. So we'll say, this level of being in love with Hashem, of literally being in love, with the definition that we espoused before. Being in love with Hashem is a level that the early Hasidim were able to reach. Ukimamar David HaMelech Alav Shalom. Now we'll say here that Ramchal is going to quote a series of psukim that speak to this dynamic of being in love. Ka'ayal ta'arog alafiki mayim, ke nafshi tarog elecha elokim. It was so beautiful, like a deer that drinks by the streams of water. So too my soul tarog yearns for you, pines for you, Hashem. Sama nafshi lelokim lekel chai. Literally, my soul thirsts for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Va'omer nichsefa v'gam kol nafshi lechasros Hashem. Sama lecha nafshi kama lecha besari. Kol zeh mitokef hateshuka shehaya mishtokek lo yisparach. These are all expressions that David HaMelech used in Tehillim to highlight this yearning, this desire, this love, this want to connect. Uke'inyan mashenema sha'amar hanavi l'shimcha zichra tavas nefesh. Va'omer nafshi v'sicha balayla afruchi bekirbi ashacharecha. But David Asma Amar is going through the psukim Im zacharti al yitzuai ba'ashmoras agebach. Be'er ha'oneg ba'ashashua. Shahaya lo b'dabra bo b'shivcha yisbach shemodar melech is describing the joy that he had when simply speaking about the Ribbon Shalom. Va'amar v'eshtasha b'misosecha sherahafti. Va'amar gamei dosecha shasha. So we'll stop over for today. A little bit over. We'll stop over for today. But again, I both say now that Ramchal gives us a working definition of love. Right? He doesn't tell us. He's not talking on an actional perspective, but rather again focusing on what it means to be in love. This all-consuming, all-encompassing desire and want to be close, to be one, to be united, to serve, to do for that person, that thing who I love so much. That would relate to our own experience of being in love. That's what it means to be in love with Hashem. How we get there, what we need to do once we're there, and Meretz Hashem to begin to continue.